Also new tonight, a former Grand Rapids State Senator's federal trial has been pushed back. Justin Eichorn is accused of soliciting who he thought was a minor for sex. He was one of 13 men arrested a year ago during a sting by Bloomington police. His federal trial was set to start this week, but his attorney requested a continuance due to a scheduling conflict. The judge granted that request, and now the trial will start June 1st. The Republican resigned from the state Senate last year shortly after he was charged. A judge ordered him to spend time at a Duluth halfway house as his case played out.